Well, let's now speak to Ulrich Brueckner. He's a professor of European Studies at Stanford University, and he now joins me from Dresden in Germany. Ulrich, as we've been hearing there from our correspondents about such different perspectives from various countries, including advice from various ministers about just whether people should travel over the summer. So how does the EU eventually come together on this? Because they have to at some point.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big problem, given that Germany is a federal state and the European Union is not. We have a similar situation in Germany in which the different governors come to different conclusions based on different problems, based on different density of population, and no one makes it a big deal that Germany is not acting in one coherent way, but we see different ways of opening sooner or later in different parts of the country. And the same is true for the European Union and its different member states. If Spain was hit so hard and they think that it's way too early to open the borders, it makes perfect sense for Spain. While if a small country like Luxembourg is complaining that they feel cut off, if Germany doesn't open the borders and their situation is much better in terms of numbers than in Spain, then Germany should respond. And the Minister of the Interior gave in and will open sooner. So we have cross-border relationships with Luxembourg much sooner than with other countries.
Sure. Ulrich, I see that part of the plan is for countries with similar overall risk profiles to open to each other's tourists, right? So how will that be determined, especially with the situation moving really very quickly and then small outbreaks potentially possible anywhere?
Well, I don't think that an army of tourists is sitting on their suitcases and can't wait to go to places that we recently saw just from what the situation in hospitals is. Sure. I think people will be very careful, and cross-border transactions will be basically on professional traveling and not so much that people can't wait to go to a vacation resort or to lie on beaches in Italy and in Spain. But what the European Union is responsible for is to provide a framework of the mobility of goods, services, capital, and labor. And that includes services like tourism, that people get an understanding of what is the general framework. How we respond to this depends very much on the different discourses in each and every member state. And that makes perfect sense, given that we don't know where we are at this point of the pandemic.
You're talking about some really bilateral agreements here, and I know that the EU wasn't initially keen on the idea of these potential tourism corridors to begin with. What's changed their mind here?
Well, we have a very sophisticated and also dynamic relationship when it comes to who's responsible for what. Which competences do we shift from a national to a supranational level, and in which area does the European Commission have a say? This is sometimes confusing because in absence of leadership by the European Commission, one complains that Europe is not doing enough or not doing quickly enough. While the same is true in the member states of the European Union, like Germany, in which Angela Merkel could give some sort of a general direction. But now in the phase of opening, the governors play a much more prominent role. And the same is true with the European Union, with still a much more decentralized share of competences that we will continue to discuss when it comes to solidarity, who's helping whom with how much and over what period of time, and all the related questions that we have to discuss once after the pandemic, the economic crisis will hit harder.
Ulrich Brueckner there, a professor of European Studies at Stanford University. Always good to get your insights on Al Jazeera.